Hello, Ruby here. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I'm a professional psychic medium, tarot reader, astrologer, priestess, and witch. And today we are going to be reviewing Oracle of the Hekatean Path. This is a 60 card deck by Ken Payne and Chris Butler, published by Los Scarabeo. I believe this deck came out earlier this year, and this was definitely a case of a right deck, wrong time for me. I remember when I first picked up this deck, I want to say it was in February or March. I really struggled to connect in with it, but I have been preparing for the month of June on my Patreon page. For the month of June, we are going to be walking with Hecate and connecting in with Hecate for the entire month. And so in preparation for that journey, I have been really connecting in with this deck, and it's been really surprising me. I have never connected so strongly with a deity in tandem with card work as I have connecting in with Hecate and utilizing this deck as a tool for channeling. So I will, go through the, all the review things, talk about the card stock and what I like about the deck and what I don't like about the deck. But if you are really looking for a tool to channel Hecatean wisdom, and if you walk with Hecate as a guide on your journey, I do think that this is one that's worth investing in. The price point is pretty reasonable for a deck. I have it on the back here as retailing at $21.95, but the quality is not amazing. It's very typical Los Scarabeo quality, and I've talked about on this channel many times. I'm not really impressed with the quality of their cardstock or their guidebooks. Majority of the time, once in a while, they do surprise me. But especially with something like an oracle dedicated to a deity, I personally would pay $10 more, $20 more for a really detailed guidebook and really pristine cardstock and deck quality. So Oracle of the Hecatean Path is the name of the deck. We have black interior. We have this little multi-language guidebook. Let's start exploring the guidebook, shall we? It's pretty bare bones. So there is a dedication in the front and acknowledgments, introduction, how to use this deck. And then we get into the card meanings themselves. And each card definition, you're getting a very small paragraph for each card, and it goes into the epithet of the name of Hecate that's being used, but it's not a lot of information. I would really like to see more. I would really love a Hecate deck really in line with the Alana Fairchild, Kali, or Isis decks, where you're actually getting channeled information from the goddess herself. That is definitely not the vibe here. So if you like an in-depth guidebook, you'll probably be disappointed. I've referenced the guidebook every now and again with this deck, but it's not something that I'm going to utilize often, just being honest. So let's see how much we are getting in English. All right, so this is the English language portion of the guidebook. So that's really all the material that's there. Los Scarabeo likes to trick us with these multiple language guidebooks. You think you're getting a lot more than you're getting. Now, the cardstock itself leaves a lot to be desired. You can see I don't know if you can see it, my fingerprints on it. So it's really shiny, not the greatest cardstock, and because it's black, it's gonna pick up fingerprints. I really would have loved to see, again, a higher quality cardstock with maybe a gilded edge if we're talking about a Hecate Oracle deck, which is something that I think has been really missing on the market for a long time. I think this had so much potential to be better than what it is, but I am a bougie tourist who likes really nice decks. I would rather purchase, an indie deck or a deck that is a little more expensive in price, because I don't consistently just buy decks again and again and again. I'm picky about what new decks come into my collection. So the quality isn't really there for me with this deck, and I'll show you the artwork in a minute. But my biggest complaint with this deck, besides the fact that I would have loved to see just some more care into, you know, the presentation and the quality, is that it feels very masculine in nature. And I know that it was created by two, I'm guessing, men, just by their names. But Hecate is a goddess, okay? And just because this deck was created by men, I don't feel like it needs to be so masculine in nature, all right? If this was a deck for Pluto, or if this was a deck for Aries, a more masculine archetype, that would be totally fine. But even though Hecate is a dark goddess, she is a goddess, and she has many different characteristics and qualities and multitudes and epithets. So I would have liked to see something that honors her feminine nature a little more. The bare bones nature of this deck, the backings, everything reads really masculine to me. And I do think that detracts from the nature of Hecate herself, all right? Now, the Oracle itself, I really enjoy in terms of it's 60 cards. That's a decent sized deck. And for most cards, you are getting an epithet of, and that is a name, a description, a quality of Hecate, and a translation of that. So for here we have soteria, that might be how you pronounce it in Greek, and then the translation of that, which is salvation, and then a card descriptor, like a card meaning descriptor, so salvation. So this is describing Hecate in her role as savior, all right? So not every card is an epithet, but if it's not an epithet, it is some other reference to another character in Hecate's story. You'll see as we go along. So this is Hecate in her role as a life giver, abundance. And I don't hate all of the artwork, but some of it isn't my favorite. Like, I really love the vibe of this, but it's not my preferred artwork. So here we have transformation, Cleidocus, key bearer. So if you are getting to know the goddess Hecate, you know, this does accurately represent her nature. You know, obviously the deck creators know what they're doing here. I work with the names and the epithets of Hecate a lot when I'm working with that specific goddess. So here we don't have a name of the goddess, we have full moon illumination. So we're talking about an aspect of the goddess here, okay? So if you're learning about the goddess, or if you're on a path of getting to know the goddess, having a relationship with the goddess, I do think this deck is worth adding to your collection. Here we have the Restless Dead, Unresolved Past. Lyanna, the Lioness Strength. So I really do feel that this deck gives you we have Dionysus. So Dionysus is another god from the Greek pantheon, but it's in Hecate's wheelhouse, right? So this deck gives you a really well-rounded knowledge of some of the attributes of Hecate, some of the things you can call on her for, some of the realms that she resides over. And I think it can be a helpful learning device if you are on a journey of being in devotion to Hecate. And I enjoy how diverse, I guess, this deck can be used, or at least I use this deck in a multitude of ways. So like I said at the beginning of this, I love this card. At the beginning of this video, I have been using this deck to channel messages from Hecate, and I have never had such accurate messages from a goddess. So regardless of what my own issues and preferences are with this deck, I feel like Hecate likes this deck because I've again used the medium of tarot and oracle to connect in with different energies before, and I've never felt like I'm getting such clear messages. It kind of freaks me out. Like, this deck has been so bang on accurate for me. It's been made me a little uneasy at times, and it's made me feel like my connection with the goddess is really strong. So it's really brought me confidence on the fact that I am connected to Hekate, and I can channel messages from her, and I am on a path of devotion and connection with her, because the way that she speaks to me through this deck is so precise. So that's a way that I use this deck, is to connect in with the goddess of Hekate herself, and to channel messages from her. Because there's so many cards in this deck, and it reads so clear, like you are getting a divinatory meaning on each card. I've also used this deck to clarify tarot and to pull in messages for clients who are connected to Hekate. So this isn't a deck I would necessarily bring into the shop and just use to read for anybody. But today, for example, I had an hour-long reading with a client, and I felt very intuitively guided to bring this deck into the reading. And the minute I started reading for her, I knew she had a connection to Hekate. We talked about it a lot during the reading. And this deck really helped me bring in some insights for her spiritual path and what she's currently walking through. So it can definitely be used to read in terms of current life and what's unfolding, but I wouldn't use it as like just a more mundane reader. I would use it more for spiritual path, but you can use it as a clarifier for oracle for sure. Another way that I use this deck, so we have Hermes the messenger. Again, that's a separate deity in the Greek pantheon. But because it is in the same pantheon in which Hekate resides as, as Hekate, I believe that her energy is not limited to just that. It makes sense that it is included in this deck. New moon beginning. So another way that I use this deck is there are specific epithets that I'll use of Hekate. So for example, if I'm really wanting a door opened for me, I'll use the epithet, the name Cleidochus, which is Hekate is the key bearer, the unlocker of doors, right? So I will have that specific card on my altar. I will chant names of Hekate similarly to how I use Sanskrit and Buddhist mantras. So I will take my 108 mala bead out, and I will chant, Hail Hekate Cleidochus, Hail Hekate Lampadius, Hail Hekate Enodia. And it's nice to have those specific faces of the goddess on my altar when I do that. And so that's another way that I use this deck. Here is the Persephone card. So, this is a deck that you can use for divinatory readings, to channel messages from the goddess, as a learning tool and device if you are getting to know the goddess, and also as a tool in ritual and spellcrafting. And so for that, I do think that it is worth it adding to your collection. I love this. And I think so much of the time, Hekate is really stereotyped as a dark goddess, but she does contain multitudes. She is the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And I have no issue working with Hekate in my practice, and also working with angelic energy and Yeshua. So these energies, while they might seem opposed to one another, they align. This is a good deck to really open your understanding of what Hekate is, using her names, right? Using names from her original source material. I love this one as well. So, despite the fact that maybe even if there was different cardstock, I might like the artwork a little more, but you can tell that men made this deck. You can tell. But despite that fact, I think if you are on a path of connecting in with the goddess, this is one that would only benefit you to have in your connection. I think if it's not the right time, you won't connect with it, because that was the case for me. Like I shared at the beginning of this video, I probably had this deck for like, 2 months, 3 months, before I felt connected to it at all. And now I'm just like, this is my Hekate deck. Like, this is the only deck I want to use to connect in with Hekate, at least as long as far as Oracle is concerned. Words. I've used this in conjunction with a few other tarot decks. I haven't found the right tarot deck to use with this. But I did order something in the mail. I think might be a good pairing. So I'll let you know if that ends up being the case. But now that I've connected in with this deck, I definitely feel very connected with it. And I do think we are meant to connect with decks when we're meant to connect with them. So if you have this one and you haven't connected with it yet, that doesn't mean it's necessarily, not in the cards for you, no pun intended, forever. I love this one. All right, so I guess I'll leave the rest of the cards for you to see for yourself. I'm just going to show you the rest. We're almost done, because there are some good ones coming up. And look at this. And I really don't dislike the artwork. I do prefer either something that feels a little more personal. I would say this artwork doesn't feel super personal in the way that, the Ritual Tarot or the Rain Shadow Tarot or the Memento Mori Oracle feels. And so I think that's my issue with the artwork. It feels that they just picked images to go with cards. But Hekate does not seem to mind. Now, if you are a part of the Patreon, I will be using this deck all month to connect in with the goddess. So this might be one that you want to invest in as well. And if you are a part of the Patreon, I will be making a video once June rolls around at the very beginning of the month, sharing other ways and other tools that I use to connect in with this goddess, as well as the source material that I will be using and referencing as we move throughout the month. So stay tuned for that if you are on the Patreon. If you aren't currently on the Patreon, I will leave the link in the bio for you to join. Some people join for a specific month, for a specific goddess, and then we have a really lovely group of people that have been with the Patreon for months now, and the community that's growing there is so inspiring. I'm so grateful for it. It's a really lovely group of practitioners and seekers on the spiritual path. So if you are looking for more community on your spiritual walk, I definitely recommend checking the Patreon out. And that is pretty much all I have for you today. So again, that was Oracle of the Hekatean Path by Chris Butler and Ken Payne, published by Lo Scarabeo. I would love to see more specific goddess decks on the market. And I would also love to see decks that have a little more, care put into the artwork, a la the Alana Fairchild decks illustrated by Jimmy Manton. Those to me are just so top tier, like goals level. Nothing else ever really meets them when it comes to like goddess themed decks. So I would love a Hekate deck in that stream, but until then, this will have to suffice. And like I said, even though I have little nitpicks around it, this deck has been so bang on accurate when it comes to channeling messages from Hekate. I adore this deck. Like, my ego can have specific preferences when it comes to decks, and it will, because I am picky, and I have expensive taste. But in terms as a magical tool, I'm really, really loving this deck. And because it feels like my connection to Hekate, like no other deck has, I'm just really attached to it, and I really love her. Even though she's kind of manly. Okay, and I'm so girly that, even if we're dealing with a more like dark goth deity, I want it to feel feminine. So that's all. It was really nice to hop on and talk about decks. I know I haven't been as present on the YouTube channel, and that is something that I'm hoping to remedy as I kind of shift things in my professional work to build out more time for the online stuff. So if there's any other decks on the market you would like me to pick up and purchase, I've been kind of in a deck rut the past couple months and haven't been really inspired. And I'm just feeling that inspiration come in. And thankfully, some of my Patreon members who I do one-on-ones with every month have been giving me some deck recommendations. So I have some new decks coming in, but definitely I feel like my spiritual path, whenever it gets a little bit of a lull, bringing in some new fun materials like perks me back up. So I'm feeling a little perked back up and would like continue to stay perked up in my spiritual practice. So if you have any decks that you've been enjoying that you would like me to review, leave it in the comments. And as always, I am sending you so much love and wishing you well.